Hello, this video is going to be my 3 biggest pots in live poker. So I'm going to try and keep the denominations in pounds, even though they weren't in pounds, just because it makes more sense in my head, and to let you guys know roughly how big the pots were. So hand number 1 is the first massive pot I ever played, and this one I had to go for a walk afterwards. It's a big game. There are 7 regs at the table and 2 VIPs, I believe. The VIPs are friends, and I believe both VIPs are winning in this game, and they're really enjoying it so far. Me, on the other hand, well, first of all, how big is the game? The game is 100, 200, 400 pounds. So 100, 200 with a 400 pound straddle. So what you probably call 40K now. I get it. Well, it's supposed to be 20K now, but then the straddle makes it 40K now. But technically that's slightly bigger than 40K now because you actually got 3 blinds, not 2. I think at this point, I'm probably in for about £60,000, maybe slightly more, and I think I've got £100,000 on the table, so I'm up small. Well, I'm up basically a buy-in. So action starts. VIP number 1 opens from about seat 7. Reg 3 bets. Now what you have to understand is in these games, people don't always sit max because these are very rare games that you get to play these big stakes. People are shot taking. People are quite happy to sit with 20K or 40K or let their stacks bleed for a little bit because the games are so big, and you're still plus EV to sit with a short stack. Not as plus EV maybe if you were sitting deeper, but then the variance is higher. So it's not uncommon for regs to not sit with a full stack. So I don't remember the exact amounts, but let's say VIP number 1 opens to £1,500. The reg 3 bets to say £4,000, and then he gets cold called by VIP number 2, so he calls to £4,000. Both VIPs have £100,000. I also have £100,000, and the reg has £36,000. I have Ace King off in the big blind. So what do I want to do? Well, I definitely want to be 4-betting, but I have to think about stack sizes. Versus the reg, he's going to be pretty wide 3-betting a VIP, so we'll probably have to go with this anyway. But I don't want to go so big that if he jams, he knows he has no fold equity and only jams good hands. Equally, I want to put as much money as I can in versus the VIPs when they're still going to call hands that are worse than Ace King. So I believe I make it around £10,000, and that's enough because I want some wiggle room post flop even versus the VIPs as well. First VIP folds, the reg folds, and then the second VIP calls. Then we get a flop of deuce, deuce, 3 rainbow. We're heads up, and I fire out a C bet of about 1/3 the size of the pot, and he calls. Turns a 7, which I can't remember what suit it was. I believe it brought a flush draw, and I barrel because I had a flush draw blocker. I wouldn't always barrel this turn. I think I had the king of hearts, and it was a 7 of hearts on the turn. And I barreled about £20,000 into about £27,000. And he calls again. River brings the 3rd deuce. So now aces is clearly the nuts, unless he has ace deuce. And I basically have to decide whether I want to check, call, check fold, or jam. I would have been jamming at least 60 into 67. Actually thinking back, in my head, I thought the pot was 90 into 80, or I remember thinking if it had called, the pot was about 270,000, so I probably have these amounts slightly off. Either way, the pot's massive, right? It did end up jamming, and then he goes into the tank. He tanks for about 10 seconds, which in my head was probably about an hour, and he does decide to fold. I flicker my cards to the guy next to me and go to fold, and then another reg goes, show one, show all. I'd only really flipped my cards to the guy next to me because I'm just like, can you believe what just happened? Because I believe that no one at that table thought I was going to be able to bluff in that spot just because the pot was so big, such a rare game, but psychopath. Gingers have no souls. So I look at the VIP because I don't want to be disrespectful, and I look at his friends. So I look at VIP number 1 and I said, do you want me to show? And the VIP's like, yeah, show. And these are the kind of VIPs where if I'd have showed him a bluff, he's not going to storm off and leave. He's just going to get mad. So I turn over my hand, and then all you just hear them just natter back and forth in their own language. And I'm like, got him. But then the adrenaline was just like so high that my hand is just literally shaking after the hand. I had to go for a walk. I just remember thinking, because this is why I know the pot was at least 270k, because I remember thinking that if it had called and I lost, the pot would have been 270k, and that's more than my mom and dad's house. Like, that's ridiculous. Hand number 2. So this is actually an all red game where we're kind of sitting there hoping that a VIP might turn up today. Long story short, it doesn't, so we're just grinding all day amongst regs. And just happens to be a day where the cards are running in a way that I'm just showing some pretty insane bluffs, and I'm turning my cards over and people are a bit like, whoa, what's going on here? And to someone that maybe hasn't looked at Pyro, some of my bluffs would look insane. And to someone that has looked at Pyro, my bluffs would look a little bit insane. Just because my assumptions and my reads would have been in a way that was just like, yep, probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it. And it was just one of those days where some of the bluffs worked, some of them didn't. But when they didn't work, I made sure I showed them. So people just thought that I was absolutely going for it this day. But I'd managed to spin my 20k in a 1 in 200 game up to about 100k. So regardless of all these bluffs are failing, sometimes I am getting paid. And to the point where there was a guy, I'm pretty sure he was topping up to cover me because he thought I was that crazy. And here's what happened to him. So I opened pocket tens, MP, early position. He 3-bets, cut off a button. I flat. Board comes 10-7-7 rainbow. He c-bets. I check raise pretty big, which is relatively standard when we're deeper. We can definitely have a more polarized sizing. We can definitely size up when we're deeper. And I'm just gonna get so much value because the guy just is never gonna believe me on this board. Turn comes an 8 and I bomb pot or slightly over pot. And the pot's like 20k on the flop, and then I would have bombed like 22k on the turn. And he tank calls, river's a brick. I jam for 65k into like 65. Maybe I jam like 70 into like 65, and he just goes into the tank. And I'm just staring. I just remember staring at my chips, going, if my image is ever going to get me paid, like one time, this is going to be the time. I'm staring at the chip and I'm tanking and tanking. Well, he's tanking and tanking and tanking. And I'm staring and staring and staring. And then all I hear him is go, for fuck's sake. At that point, I just knew he was calling. Because to him, being bluffed there would have been worse than being wrong in his head. Like, that's wrong, obviously, but I could just tell that's where the psychology of his head was at. And he puts the money in, and the pot is about £200,000 pot. Straight to me. Top vote. And number 3. So this pot is against a famous online player called Limitless. And this was in a live game. And we played through the night because we knew the VIP was going to be turning up the next day. Folds to Limitless on the button, and he opens. I 3-bet the small blind with pocket 8s. This is again a 1 in 200 pound game. He calls, and the flop comes 9-9-7 with 2 hearts. I c-bet 2,300. He raises me to 6,900, 7,000. And I call. Could be ahead, and I have loads of ways to improve my hand on this board. Pot's about 21,000 on the turn, and the turn brings the 5 of hearts. So it completes the flush and gives me a gut shot as well. Must have had a straight flush draw as well. I must have, right? I check, and he bets a third, which is about 7,000. I call. So now the pot's 35,000 going to the river. River is a third 9, so now it trips on the board, and the pot is about 35k. I lead for 12k. This card is better for my range. I'm obviously going to have less quads, but I have all the boats. And Limitless, being Limitless, decides to jam in my face. And if you've watched any of my streams or if you've watched any of my content, you know that I'm not really a tanker. I tend not, obviously do think about things, but I tend to come to conclusions pretty quickly, and I'm quite content if they're right or wrong. And if they are right or wrong, I'll think about it more in depth afterwards. This is probably the longest I've ever tanked in a single hand of poker. Limitless is someone that I've studied a reasonable amount of, and if I hadn't studied him, I'm probably just always folding this spot. But Limitless is a maniac. Limitless is definitely bluffing this spot, and more than capable of doing it. And I was in the tank for so long, and the reason I ended up calling, let me just think about how big this jam was. I believe the jam was like 60k over my 12. So it's a big jam. And I end up calling, and my logic is that I believe that he would have raised bigger on the flop if he had a 9. And the reason I think that is because I know that I'm going to be relatively inelastic on the flop. And by that I mean that I would have called a raise and a bet on the flop and turn regardless of sizing, with a hand like aces, kings, or 10s plus. And I think that he would have wanted to max value versus those hands with a 9 on the flop, especially when we're really deep, because he's going to want to try and get the most money he can when I'm going to call these 2 streets with those hands. And that was the last piece of logic I used to call. And he showed me ace king with a king of hearts. So that was pretty sick. That was pretty exciting. I was pretty excited by that. And Luminous being Luminous, great guy, he just laughed and asked for a towel because he needed to wipe the sweat off his brow afterwards, because I was in the tank for so long, and we all kind of laughed about it and moved on. But those are the 3 biggest pots I've ever played. Let me know what you think. Please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.